Welcome to Prepared for Parenthood, the podcast for hopeful, expectant, and new parents with little ones up to age 5. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Duger, a psychotherapist, author, educator, parent coach, and married mother of 2. On this show, we'll discuss everything from the most up-to-date practicals of best supporting your young children, to thriving in relationship as a family, to more surprising topics around the psychology and development of babies from conception through age 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Welcome back to Prepared for Parenthood. Our guest today is Kay Paschal. Kay and her husband built and own 2 private preschools in the communities of Alpharetta and Johns Creek, Georgia, for 25 years. During that time, for about 15 years, Kay was a monthly contributor to magazines and newspapers citywide on parenting tips and trends. She was also a committee chair on the board of directors for the Georgia Child Care Association, one of the largest child care advocacy associations in the country. After retiring, Kay wrote this book based on her article topics, as well as on the experience of raising her 2 sons, called Insert Giggle Giggle, Laughing Your Way Through Raising Kids and Running a Business, which was recognized as a 2023 finalist for Best Books for Parents through Zibby Publishing. Welcome, Kay. We're so glad you could join us today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Can you share a little bit about what inspired you and your husband to build and own 2 preschools in your area? And what was your favorite part of that experience?
Well, it's a very interesting story because my husband and I were the quintessential corporate yuppie couple. We were married 10 years before we decided to start our family. And when our first son was a year old, my husband took a job transfer to Texas. We had always lived in Atlanta our whole life. And so we were out there for 3 years. I became pregnant again with our second son. And my husband's company decided to close the office in Texas. And then they moved us back to Atlanta and they wanted to move us to Singapore. And I had a almost 4-year-old about to deliver our second child. And we just didn't think that that move suited our young family. And so now we were both jobless. What do we do? And so we decided, hey, I think we'll just open up a daycare preschool. Our boys can grow up there. We knew nothing about running a business. We had always been in the corporate culture. And neither one of us had any kind of degree or knowledge about early childhood development. So, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? We went forward with it. And 25 years later, it was just such a wonderful success by so many measures. We loved everything about owning those preschools. I think what I enjoyed about it most was bringing those families together. Because once I got on social media about 6 months before my book was published, I started reconnecting with a lot of these past preschool parents that I haven't seen or heard from in 25 or 30 years. They really brought that home to me, what that preschool meant to their child and to their families, as they had relationships that they had met families at my preschool when their kids were little that they still had ongoing today. And that's just such a wonderful thing to have witnessed over and over and over 25 years.
Amazing. And about how many families were in each of your preschools?
One of the schools had about 125 families, and the other one around 200 families throughout those years. So just thousands of families went through our preschools in 25 years.
And did you do anything in particular to encourage the community building, or did it just naturally unfold?
I think it naturally unfolded. I mean, we were such a different type of a daycare preschool in the community. Everything around us was one of the big box corporate centers. So we were very much on that cutting edge of being privately owned. And when we opened up the preschool, I was more or less the same age as all of my customers. And they really attached on to the feeling that I was just a young mom too. And I was very upfront with everyone as they came in to tour the school that this was not something that I had a degree in, any experience in. It was just such a family connection. And I was very honest with the people. I may not know everything about early childhood development. I'm learning like you are, but I've got this wonderful faculty and they know a lot. And we're all going to just be here taking care of our children together. And I think that really resonated with young moms in that community. And by the end of probably 5 years, I felt like I was an expert in everything. You
Spent many years writing articles geared towards parenting and offering parenting tips. What do you consider to be some of the most important tips you shared over the years for parents of young children? And what were some of the shifts and trends that you witnessed during that time?
I am a very laid back parent myself. So one of the tips that I had for the young parents were just to relax a little bit. You know more than you think you know about what you're doing, and trust yourself. Embrace the silly sometimes. Don't think everything is so majorly important that it's going to impact your child for the rest of their life. You can't overanalyze and try to be perfect all the time. You need to embrace the mistakes. As my boys got older, some of those things that I thought were the biggest failures of myself are the most endearing things that they think of me as a mom, that we still laugh about and can joke about. And I think that that's really important to not overanalyze and over dramatize when you have young kids, because so much silly stuff happens. So many mistakes happen.
I really appreciate that intention of being a little bit more laid back, having a sense of humor as a parent, not being too hard on yourself, which I feel like it's easy to do sometimes, where we feel like we mess up something and therefore it's going to impact your child forever.
Right.
And hopefully that's not the case. And I love hearing that some of the places where you felt you weren't your best as a parent ended up being an endearing memory for your sons. So
Absolutely.
I think that's really inspires a lot of hope for young parents. The second question was, what were some of the shifts and trends that you witnessed during your time in that 25-year span?
Most notably was the change in the fathers in the 25 years. When we first opened our preschool in the mid 1990s, we hardly ever saw a father come into the preschool. Most of the couples in those early years were dual working couples. It was not until later in the years that moms and dads began working at home, or we had a lot of stay at home moms or stay at home dads bring their children into the preschool just for academic or socialization or to have some fun. But in those very early years, most of the families were dual working couples, and the mother was still responsible for bringing the kids in, going to work, and then coming and getting the kids in the evening. And by the time that we sold our business and retired in 2018, we had more dads involved on a day-to-day basis than we had moms. They were coming in and chaperoning field trips, and they were dropping the kids off, picking them up, grabbing one kid to go to a soccer practice while the mom came to get the other child, braiding the little girl's hair to go to ballet. It was such a tremendous shift that we saw the involvement of dads over that period of time that just really related to a lot of the social things going on, work-life balance and things that were happening outside of parenthood. Another big shift that we saw was parent being a little bit more involved in what's my child going to eat and drink more. When I would do tours of the preschool in the beginning years, a lot of it centered around the activities or the curriculum or the experience of the teachers. In those later years, almost all of my touring questions centered around water and food. And I found that very interesting because being my age, growing up with Kool-Aid and Crisco, I really had to study and make sure that I was responding to the needs of these parents these days appropriately and not subjecting them to a lot of my beliefs about what kids need to eat on a daily basis. So we really needed to shift our catering and our snacks to accommodate the healthy and organic eating trends. I mean, we had so many milk options available. It was a really tough thing to manage sometimes. That was not the situation when we first opened.
Well, kudos to you and your husband for making that shift. If that's what your clients were asking for learning about that and adjusting to the times. You have 2 chapters in your book inviting parents to consider what kind of parent they are. Can you share a little bit about what a parent might consider in trying to answer that question for themselves?
Well, I found it very interesting just observing so many parents through 25 years. You would see some parents that were very strict and abiding by the rules, wanting to make sure from their toddler to their preschool, everything was just perfect. And then you saw a lot of parents that would just fly in and almost open the door and can you take it to the classroom? And see you later. And I wanted in the book to kind of drill down on some of those parenting styles, whether you were a helicopter parent, a free range parent, uh, a lawnmower parent, and these terms got to be more prevalent in the later years. In the early years, everybody was kind of the same kind of parent. They were a little bit more laid back. I think they felt like there were more clear cut expectations for children's behavior when we first opened in the mid 1990s versus parents really giving a lot of that control to their children by the time that we ended up in 2018. I saw those type of shifts in parenting and maybe parents adapting too much to what they thought was politically parenting correct with the parent group that they might be involved in. And you could see those kind of groups build within the preschool. I tried to gear those parents for, when y'all leave, your kids are all acting the same. Sometimes, no matter what kind of parenting you have, once you're not around your children, they're just acclimating and socializing to all the other kids in the classroom.
So if I were to kind of dissect the way I parent, my kids are high school, middle school at this point, but it's been pretty attachment focused. The connection between us is the most important part for both myself and for my husband. And then my desire is for them to go out and explore the world and figure out what makes them tick and what makes them happy and encourage them in whatever sparks their interest, right? And then I see a lot of parents as a therapist and as a parent coach who have a certain idea for their children
Right.
that they would like to see play out. It's a very driven academic thing, or it's, I hope that you're going to get a soccer scholarship in college. And they are inviting that and sometimes more than inviting it, kind of pushing it. And sometimes the child responds and sometimes they don't.
Right.
So perhaps the uncovering is just a curiosity around what feels right for me, what feels right for our family, what is me and what is my child, and kind of pondering that a little bit and seeing if it fits with whatever kind of parenting style you have, whatever your values are. Along that same lines, the preschool experience can mean a lot of different things to different families, so many different types of families in this country now. And it may be a place that supports learning social skills with peers, understanding how school flows in general, engaging in creative play, learning some academic skills, etc. All preschools are a little different. And we know there are many different types of preschools to consider. In our area in Colorado, for example, parents may consider public preschool, which there are a number of hours that are funded for parents until their child becomes a certain age. There are play-based preschools. There are more academically driven preschools. And there are those with specific philosophies like Montessori or Waldorf or things like that. Some of our listeners today may be wondering what kind of preschool would be a good fit for their children. And since you created these preschools, what advice might you give them? And since you have 2 grown sons as well, what general parenting advice would you offer to these parents of little ones?
I always encouraged my parents that came in for tours to tour many different types of schools. We chose a academic based preschool with a whole child development philosophy in place. We had a hardwood floor gym. We had an art studio. We had a music room. We had specialty teachers in all of these different areas. So we had a very low teacher student ratio when we were doing our academics because these children are very young. And certainly some parents come in and that was exactly what they were looking for. They wanted their children to graduate from our preschool into one of the elite private schools in Atlanta. So they wanted them to be ready. Some parents would come in and after we would explain and show the works that our children were doing, they thought that was a little bit too much for their child. They wanted them to play more. So I would always encourage them, even if you love what you see, go and look at other schools so that you really have a nice basis to really appreciate what we're doing here and what we're charging for that. And that this is going to be a good fit for your child. So it is very important that you know what you're looking for and go out and try to find that and ask those right questions for touring schools so that you're not surprised.
And then the next question was, since you have two grown sons, what general parenting advice would you offer to parents of young ones?
The advice that I would offer is realizing that you are not the same parent if you've got multiple children to those different children. It's really funny when all of a sudden your children even recognize that and start asking you, why do you let one do something that you don't let the other one do? And why do you expect me to get a certain grade and you don't expect that? A lot of the parents that I had experience with always said, my children are so different. And I think that we all experience that as moms and dads. And we do have to recognize that we do have different expectations for one child that we might not for another. We do let one child do things that we don't think another child can handle. And I know that that is the experience of my two boys. So I think the most important advice that I could give a parent from all the thousands that I have watched, and myself included, is recognize that, embrace that, and live that. Let your children know why that is going on. Really funny story when my boys were growing up. My older son was very academically inclined and very motivated. And my second son was very sports oriented and did not like school. And my first son got A's and really strove for that. And we helped him and supported that. And one time my younger son brought a bad math grade when he was in fifth grade from failing up to a C for the end of the year. And my husband and I were just overjoyed that this happened. And we were literally dancing with him in the house, like, oh my goodness, great job. And my older son at seventh grade level is looking at us like we're crazy because we're so excited that he got a C in math. So, those things just happen in families and you got to own that and recognize that. His strength isn't your strength. His weakness isn't your weakness, and really just appreciate that in your children.
I love that you're sharing about how different our children can be. Our two girls are very different as well, and yet the best of friends, which is really sweet, but very different interests and strengths. And had we tried to parent our second the way that we parented our first, even if they were more alike than they actually are, I don't think it would have gone very well. So I love that invitation to really get to know who your child is and not just what you want to see your child as. Thank you for sharing that. We have been speaking today with Kay Paschal, and so nice to have you on today. Thank you for joining us, Kay. And can you let people know, please, how they might be able to find out more about you and purchase your book?
You can follow me on Instagram at Insert Giggle Giggle. I have a website, insertgigglegiggle.com. My email is insertgigglegiggle@gmail.com. And my book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target. It's on Kindle. And I love speaking to parent groups. So just get in touch with me and we'd love to see what we could work out.
Great. Thank you so much, Kay, for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Prepared for Parenthood podcast today. I hope you found this episode educational, informational, and conversational, and that you'll join me again for another episode soon. If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, I'd very much appreciate if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you're interested in more information related to today's podcast, or are looking for parent coaching or courses, you can find my information in the show notes or online at preparedforparenthood.com.